Welcome to everyone to this new video tutorial regarding the genetic programming. Genetic programming belongs to a branch of artificial intelligence that evolves an evolutionary algorithms. I'm gonna show you just a brief summary of what we are talking about in this video. Genetic programming, what is meant by that? There are many books and many in the literature. There are many handbooks that you may want to consult regarding this interesting argument, this interesting topic. We also want to show you some common tricks and common mistakes in order to be aware of that. Some example of how to use the genetic programming software. There are many products on the market. Well, not so many, but a couple of those are very interesting to use. And last but not least is the point regarding the validation and robustness test, which is, I would say, the most crucial phase. So just few words regarding, let's start from the genetic programming definition. What exactly, in few words, what's the genetic programming? Once again, it's a branch of artificial intelligence that evolves a basic algorithm starting from a population of trading strategies from an initial population which is generated randomly. What happened? I've tried to show you to visualize what we are talking about. We have a first generation of strategy which is generated randomly. Let's say 1,000 strategies. It's the first family of members. It's the first generation which is generated randomly. Then all these members of this population compete against each other based on a function which is called fitness. It's a function, it's a user defined function such as I max net profit, low drawdown, or I average trade, and so on. The fitter members are selected as parents in order to produce a new member, a new population of members, which replaces a weaker one. So let's say from the first generation, only strategy number 5 and number 681 are the best one who better met the requirement of the fitness function we have defined. After that, these two parents are involved to fight to each other to produce new son in order to have a new generation. So in total we have the two parents and then 1,000 minus 2 children. That's the concept. The two parents will fight each other based on mutation and crossover. In the mutation, the parent's genome is combined with part of the other parent's genome to produce the child genome, and the other one is a crossover. At the end, we produce a generation after generation, a series of strategy that are evolved, and at the end we might produce the best strategy, something like that. That's the visual process. It's a bit more complex from what you see here, but this is just to give you an idea. So the approach is pretty modern, it's pretty interesting. It's totally different from the standard approach where, we might have discussed even in other video tutorials as well, where let's say I start from certain strategy, and parabolic long entry, parabolic short, whatever we want to use, and we try the best setting and so on. The genetic programming doesn't consider any specific indicator or price patterns and so on, but it starts from the history of data. For example, in TradeStation, you can download the entire data history, the entire archive, which is composed of OpenEye, low, close, and volume. Those are the typical, that's the typical repository of the data. Each bar, whatever the bar is, maybe daily, in this case for Adobe, we have selected a daily bar, but it might be hourly bar or 5-minute bar, whatever it is. At the end, you will always have, this data history, open, eye, low, close. And that's the real input for the software, for the genetic programming software. Because based on historical data, the machine tries to identify the so-called inefficiency of the specific instrument. So for these instruments, Adobe, it might be that a combination of, of RSI or even a price patterns where I compare the high of the embargo with the low of the embargo, whatever, must be the most appropriate choice. And for other instruments, might be the opposite. So that's up to the machine with a very computational, tough word to identify what's the best trading rules, which are translated in a final strategy, in a final code, which can be used in real data. As I say, there are a couple of interesting software on the market. From our perspective, we also are developing an internal software for that. From our personal perspective, we find very interesting a product called AdaptTrade, Builder from AdaptTrade. The owner of this software is a very competent person. My client is very competent, and even on the website there are so many information, not only regarding the genetic programming, but even regarding the trading itself, with interesting newsletters. So you might find some interesting input for your trading. The software, I think, can be used for free even for a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, so you might have an idea of what we are talking about. However, we also at the same time we want to be very frank. The product is very good. We also have produced some interesting strategy we use, but you must be very careful regarding the use of this product, of this software. Downloading the input. The input file, select a couple of settings from the product, and maybe you may hope to create a generation with 10 members and to find very good robust strategy. Unfortunately, that's just a dream. I mean, the product is set, but every genetic programming software requires some very careful. You must be very careful in how to use it. So the setting itself must be very accurate. There are many tips you need to keep in mind. By the way, you may want to consult from our website tradesystem.net. We dedicate an entire course regarding the genetic programming. Some tips and advice on how to use this software, for example. We gave also a couple of bonus regarding this very interesting technique with a couple of trading systems that are already tested and validated, so which are already robust. So that's, let's say, our first advice. You must be you need to try and to make some exercise, some homework regarding the software itself. And if you are very careful, you might find something very interesting. Let's move to some example. Our first recommendation in using this software is that from our personal experience is a good approach to create for one from one instrument. Let's say you choose pi. Um, it's very important that you create at least 3, 4 builder file with different settings. Um, with different settings, and if you run all these builder, the reason of creating different builder files is because if you have a power machine, you might decide to let run in parallel, so you might save some time. That's the reason, and even because you can easily compare the setting you are using. For example, yeah, just opening the first one. Um, for example, you might decide for the GP to use a not very high population size, such as 1000. I would not advise to use a very low population size, such as 10 or 100. You risk to get something not very interesting. With maybe few indicators and low complexity, for example. It's also very important to try different top strategies settings in order to see if you notice some difference between among the different builder files. And you might decide to create another builder when you want to test the neural network option, which is another important feature. And in this case, for example, you might decide to increase the complexity to be a little bit higher and to use maybe some extra indicators. So, and even from the genetic perspective, you might want to choose a higher population size, such as 5,000 or even 8,000, depending on the depending on the characteristics of your machine. If the machine is power enough, you might decide to use even 8,000, 7,000 population size. Of course, the time required to let work the builder files is of course much more. We normally we have a quite powerful machine, and typically we pardon, we use different population size, and all the files work for many hours, even 8, 10 hours, and that's the thing. Now, when all these files are working maybe in parallel, if you at the end from the top strategy list, you get very few strategy, that might be an indication that the instruments that you are trying to trade might be tough in order to show some inefficiency to be traded. Because remember, the purpose of this software is to identify the inefficiency from the instrument itself, which might be traded. So some instruments simply don't have a very hard inefficiency. So it might be an idea to leave it out. And some other one, you might have many consistent list of top strategy that you want to validate. And even in this case, in this last case, having different settings might give you the chance to select a better strategy to put live. So, but let's see some practical example. So we are moving now from even to the this part, from to see some example and validation, which is the most crucial part, as I told. Some example. Let's consider, for example, this builder over Walt Disney. First of all, what I would like to remark here, this is the input file. Oh, by the way, this builder has already been developed, as the build phase has been completed already. It has worked for a few hours, and this is the list of all the strategy. Yeah? So the strategy are already created in this example. And during the build phase, that's my approach. I prefer to stop my input file. We are talking about this file to be evaluated, to be analyzed by builder. I always stop the entire historical series to, let's say, a couple of years ago, if the bar is daily. That's because I want to evaluate the strategy that have been produced by Builder or by any other software to stress it over the unseen data, which in this case is from March 2013 till now, November 2015. So in order to see how the strategy that have been created, how do they work over the unseen data? How do they work over the real data market? Even during the build phase, by the way, we always divide the data into training part and test part, in sample and out of sample data. I don't want to dive too much into detail regarding this, all the these settings and even the metrics, which I'm not touching at all. And you may want to consider the possibility of a coach to participate to our training if you are interested in that. So once the file is created over Walt Disney in this case, then I'm doing the evaluation of all the strategy that have been already created, and I'm gonna ask to the machine, hey, show me what would you do with the code that you have created from March 2013 till today. So I just change the date here from March 2013 till today. Right? Then we move to the database of top strategies. And now I ask to the machine to evaluate only this data. You might even decide, by the way, to change your position sizing method. In this example, we are just imagining to invest for every position $2,500. You might even change to the amount, or even to change the position sizing method, such as fixed fractional or fixed ratio, whatever you want. So I'm going to ask the machine to evaluate all these process, and you see in some cases from March 2013 till today the net profit is negative. In this case, so we are already moving to the validation phase. What I'm going to do is just to delete all this strategy which shows not working on the unseen data. And you might even decide to delete either with a very low average rate, something like that, or with a low correlation coefficient, and so on. But you have also some very interesting results here. Oh, maybe I've changed. Oh, pardon, I didn't put here so that's why my mistake. Pardon. So we do the evaluation. Yeah, now it's okay. You see, there are some interesting results from March 2013 till today over the unseen data. So the code that, let's say, I have created 1 week ago, where the input data were stopped here to March 2013, I say, hey, show me what would you do in the last couple of years. That's an interesting result. Now, even where the result is pretty interesting, I would exclude anyway some of these. So if I look at the map, for example, this equity line, I would not take into account for something that I don't like. I'm seeing from the map. But once again, I don't want to go too much into detail. Once again, visit our website regarding the training, and you might be interested to go further. But first thing that I would do is to delete all this negative net profit, very low average rate, very low or even negative like this correlation coefficient. And so I do a first selection of top strategies. So we are doing a sort of selection of top strategy from top strategies. The other thing that I normally do, I ask, okay, I say you have produced me a database of, I don't know, 1000 top strategies. Question: you are showing me those strategies would work over the unseen data. I also want to know if I give the to the code that has been created, what happens if I ask, okay, this code has been produced, has been created for Walt Disney. I want to know what happens if the same code is working over another symbol such as spy. That's also an interesting test. Now, I don't expect, of course, that the equity line is perfect, but at least I expect something where I see some disaster in terms of equity line, then I would delete. Let me show you, even in this case, what I want to say. Here, everything is fine. Evaluate hold. Now the machine is working, is evaluating all the members, and that's the result. You see that in some cases, oh, by the way, this is a long only system, so maybe the number of trades is not so high. I always prefer, that's also another personal approach, to create strategy which are long only and strategy which are short only, and they are at the end combined in a portfolio. I'm gonna share. So this code here, once again, had been created for Walt Disney, but at the end I'm testing over SPY, and in some cases it's okay, but on the other one you see here a very bad result. So as you are understanding now, even in this case with net profit negative, I'm gonna simply delete, and so on. So at the end, from this first validation in Builder, you are deleting many strategies from top strategy database, and let's say from 500 you might move to 10 or 20, I don't know, depending on the instruments, of course. So you have a first phase of the validation. After that, the validation phase is not handy. There are other important tests that you need to think about. For example, let's move to this new builder file for USD CAD. Equity is not spectacular, but another important test which is available in Builder is the Monte Carlo stress test, which is very important from my point of view, because now I don't want to go in, even for Monte Carlo stress test too much into detail, but this is, as you might know, is a simulation where you can change some characteristics, some the price patterns, the strategy input, and to see how to your strategy react to this change. It's a way to see how would the strategy, the behavior of the strategy over the future market data. That's the basic idea. It's a simulation technique. There are books and many articles on that you can read. But let's say that I have done the first selection that I showed you before. So deletion of strategy with bad behavior over unseen data and over a second symbol, and at the end you get few strategy. The final test that you need to do is definitely this Monte Carlo stress test simulation. So if I run, and what I don't want to see are, after this test, negative net profit once again, and even the max drawdown percent should be lower than double. So if here I see 24%, I don't want to see something very close to 48 or 50. That's my personal approach once again. So if I run the stress test, you see here, yeah, the max drawdown is very high. That's something that I don't like. And even the net profit, the overall net profit is negative. So that's not a good candidate for real data. Let's run it again. And even the equity line you see are very uh, far away from each other. Let's try to make a more severe stress test where I increase the number of iterations. Let's see what happens. Now the number of equity line are increasing, and once again you see how can I say, even from a visual point of view, you might see the equity line can be very different from each other depending on the market condition. Max drawdown is still very high and net profit is negative. That's definitely, it's not a candidate for real data. Let's see something else. Let's see something else. For example, if we move to another symbol, such as Reynolds American, if I take this strategy, let's sort and by correlation coefficient. This strategy is very interesting. I have already done the selection from top strategy for the strategy which have a negative behavior over the second symbol and negative behavior over the unseen data. You see here the unseen data that might start from here, and even the equity is pretty fine. So this strategy is already the result of the former selection that I have described before. Now let's do a stress test for this. So this is a good candidate because this list has already faced the selection that we have described. If I apply the stress test to this strategy, you see here how now the equity line are pretty okay and close to each other. Net profit is still negative, and max drawdown is not even close to the double. Yeah, original max drawdown percent was 27, now it's even lower. So that's a very good candidate. I want to do a more tough test and to increase the number of iteration, and let's see what happens. You see, equity line are still very close to each other. Net profit is positive and max drawdown is okay. So that's definitely a good candidate. It's a long only system, so the number of trade is not so high. It does not include any short position. It's a long only. However, I think the number of trades are not so high. Yeah, 160 might be a bit lower. So that's why I always invite to use different. No. That's why I always invite to use different settings, because at the end you say, yeah, that's a very good strategy. The stress test is okay, the validation is okay, hey, but the number of trades is lower. So you might decide to try different settings and see what happens. So if I move to another file, such as this one, this strategy is once again is also on top of the list when I sort the correlation coefficient. By the way, correlation coefficient is just an indication of how the equity line is, let's say, a smooth line, not with very tough up and down. So this is already a good candidate. Number of trade starts to be reasonable. Also, once again, I'm not discussing the metrics, which is another very important things to keep in mind, such as profit factor, maximum drawdown percent. We have said I always have a look to the win-loss ratio in combination with percents wins and other metrics which are really important to see. So maybe you have a very good strategy like this, and with the profit factor of 50, then I would exclude anyway for reason that I want to skip now, but we discuss into detail even those details during our training regarding the genetic programming. This is a good candidate. So once again, the list in this top strategy archive is the result of the first validation we have described. So where we eliminate a strategy with negative net profit over the second symbol over the unseen data. So this is already a good strategy. Let's see what happens with the stress test, Monte Carlo stress test, the simulation of Monte Carlo. Apply stress test, evaluate only this one. It's still okay. 33 is the maximum drawdown. The profit is still positive. We might decide to make the stress test even a bit more tough, and let's see what happens. You see, even the equity line are pretty close to each other. Maybe it's not the best one, but this is already a good candidate. At the end, you might have a list of, let's say, 10, 15 strategies with all this validation in Builder, and you move this set of 10 strategies in TradeStation, and here you do the second phase of the validation, which partially we have discussed in other video, and we go into detail during our training. If you are interested to, not interested to train, but just to buy some trading system which have been produced with this approach, validation, etc., please keep a view to the trading system web page where you have a list of trading system. Keep a view to the performance. If something might be interesting to you, don't hesitate to send us an email, and we are happy to assist you. Alright, so once you have all this validation and robustness tests done in Builder, once again, you might select a list of strategy, you move in TradeStation, you make a second phase of validation and stress test, and at the end, only one or two can be the good candidate to go live. And with very severe, very tough tests, you might feel more confident into trading live the strategy, maybe after a while of working in simulated account. That's our personal advice. Alright, that's it for this new video. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have a question, don't hesitate to send us an email, and we invite you to have a look even to other video tutorials. Thank you.